Pack your bags, we're selling this dump, my son shouted while his wife started measuring my living room for new furniture. I stayed quiet and calmly started packing. The next day, a moving truck pulled up, but it wasn't for me. When the realtor arrived and asked for the deed, my son's face went white, because the house was in my name and I'd just sold it to someone else. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The cold metal end of the measuring tape clicked against the brick of the fireplace. I watched it from my armchair, the one with the worn floral print where the fabric is smooth from 40 years of use. Chloe stretched the tape across the mantel, her brow furrowed in concentration. The scent of her perfume, something sharp and floral, cut through the familiar smell of lemon polish and old books. 8 feet exactly, she announced, not to me, but to my son. Marcus stood in the center of the living room, his hands on his hips, surveying the space as if he had just conquered it. The afternoon light caught the dust motes his movement had stirred from the rug. "Good," Marcus said. "That gives us room for a more modern media console. We can mount the screen above. This whole wall will have to go, of course." I set my teacup down on the side table. The ceramic made a soft, precise sound. "This wall?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used at the library when a patron was being unreasonable but needed to be handled with courtesy. Marcus turned to me, a patient smile on his face. It was the smile he used when he thought he needed to explain something simple to someone slow. "The load-bearing one is the other side, Mom. This is just a partition. Opening it up will create a great flow from the dining area. It'll really modernize the place." "I see," I said. I did not see. I saw the wall where we had hung the children's height chart, the pencil marks still faintly visible behind the tall bookshelf. I saw the slight discoloration where the Christmas tree stood every December for 4 decades. Chloe released the tape, and it zipped back into its yellow case with a sound like a furious insect. She walked over to the front window, tapping the old wooden frame. "And these will be replaced with black-framed sliders, much sleeker. It'll brighten the whole facade." They moved through my living room, a 2-person committee of demolition. I remained in my chair. I felt a strange distance from my own body, as if I were observing the scene from the corner of the ceiling. I noted the way Marcus pointed at the ceiling fan, calling it an eyesore. I registered Chloe's dismissive wave toward my bookshelves, crammed with volumes collected over a lifetime. "We'll have the estate people deal with all this," she said. Then Marcus came and stood before me. He blocked my light. "Mom, we need to talk about the house." "We are talking about it," I said. "You are talking about knocking down walls and replacing windows." He sighed. That short, impatient exhale I had heard more and more in recent years. "No, I mean, we need to talk about the future. Chloe and I have been doing a lot of financial planning. The market is incredible right now. This neighborhood is hot. We've already spoken to a broker at First City Bank." A coldness settled in my stomach, a heavy, solid lump. I kept my hands folded in my lap. "A broker? For a loan," Chloe chimed in, coming to stand beside him. They were a united front. "We have a phenomenal opportunity to invest in a new development in the West Grove area. Townhouses. It's going to be the next big thing, but we need capital for the down payment." Marcus crouched down, putting his eyes level with mine. His face was so familiar, the same brown eyes he got from his father, but the expression in them was a stranger's. "This house is your biggest asset, Mom. It's just sitting here. You're all alone in this big place. The upkeep must be a burden. We found a wonderful senior living community, just 10 minutes from here. They have activities, a dining hall, no maintenance worries. It's perfect." The words hung in the air. Senior living community. Burden. Asset. "You want to sell my house," I stated. It was not a question. "We want to leverage the equity to secure our family's future," Marcus corrected, using the banker's term. "My future. Your grandchildren's future. The broker said we could list it for at least $700,000. Maybe more if we do some cosmetic staging first. Chloe nodded enthusiastically. We can help you pack. We'll handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger. I looked from my son's earnest, greedy face to my daughter-in-law's eager one. The coldness in my core began to spread, a glacial calm seeping into my veins. I thought of the deed in the safe deposit box downtown. I thought of Charles, his hand over mine, the weight of the pen. This is your anchor, Miriam. This is very sudden, I said, my tone carefully modulated to convey shaken surprise, not yet defiance. We've been thinking about it for a while, Marcus said, straightening up. Relieved, I could see, that I hadn't started crying or arguing. We just didn't want to worry you until we had the numbers figured out. It's a win-win, Mom. You get a safer, easier place to live, and we get a springboard for our next step. I love this house, I said quietly, letting a tremor enter my voice. I looked around the room, letting my gaze linger on the photographs, the furniture, the pattern of the afternoon sun on the floorboards I had polished myself. It was not an act. The grief was real, a sharp physical pain beneath my ribs. We know you do, Chloe said, her voice dripping with a pity that felt like acid. That's why this is so hard for us to suggest, but you have to be practical. It's just a house. It's too much for you. Just a house. The words were a brand. I felt my back stiffen against the chair. The smooth fabric under my fingertips felt like the only solid thing in the world. Marcus delivered the final blow, the line that would echo in the silence of my mind for days. He looked at me with a smile that was meant to be encouraging, but only showed his absolute certainty of my compliance. So, what do you say? Pack your bags, Mom. We're selling this dump. This dump. The home where I raised him, where I read him stories in this very room, where I nursed his father through his final illness. The air left my lungs. For a moment there was only a high-pitched silence. Then I made a decision. It was not a loud, emotional decision. It was a quiet, administrative one. A clicking into place, like the bolt on a lock. I saw the path forward with absolute clarity. They thought I was a burdensome old woman in a dump. They thought my only power was to acquiesce, to be moved from point A to point B for their convenience. They were mistaken. I let my shoulders slump just a little. I lowered my eyes to my hands. I manufactured a sigh, one that spoke of defeat, of weary acceptance. You've already spoken to the bank? Just preliminary talks, Marcus said quickly, sensing victory. Nothing is final until you agree, of course. Of course, I whispered. I looked up at him, making my eyes wide and a little watery. It's a lot to process. We'll help you through it, Chloe said, her voice suddenly warm. She had gotten what she wanted. I suppose if you think it's for the best, I said, the model of hesitant, overwhelmed motherly trust. You'll have to tell me what to do. The relief that washed over Marcus's face was profound. He leaned down and gave my shoulder an awkward pat. That's the spirit. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll take care of everything. He believed it. They both did. As they left, already discussing paint swatches and open house dates in the foyer, I sat perfectly still in my chair. The measuring tape had left a faint smudge on the mantel. I stared at it. The cold, heavy feeling was gone, replaced by a focused, crystalline resolve. They would take care of everything, and I would let them. I would let them talk and plan and measure. I would smile and nod and appear pliable, but I would not pack a single thing I cared about, and I would not be moving to any senior community. The game, as they say, was on, but they did not know they were playing, and they did not know the rules. I knew the only rule that mattered, the name on the deed. And for the first time since they had walked in, I allowed a very small, very cold smile to touch my lips. It felt like the first true expression I had made in years. The silence they left behind had a different quality than the quiet I was accustomed to. It was a thick, expectant silence, waiting to be filled with their plans. I sat in my chair until the rectangle of afternoon light on the rug had stretched and faded into dusk. Then I stood up. My knees protested, a familiar ache, but my mind was clear and operational. I went to the basement. In the corner, behind the old canning jars I never used, were flattened cardboard boxes saved from various deliveries over the years. I brought 6 of them upstairs, along with a roll of packing tape. The act felt ceremonial. I set up my staging area in the living room, right where Chloe had measured the mantel. The first box I packed was the easiest. From the bottom cabinet in the TV stand, I pulled out stacks of old magazines. National Geographic from the 1990s, Reader's Digests with curled corners. I filled the box with them, sealed it with tape, and wrote MAGS on the side in black marker. It looked like cooperation. It felt like disposal. Next, I moved to the kitchen. The high cupboard above the refrigerator held the ghosts of family meals past. A fondue pot from a brief 1970s obsession, a set of plastic Jell-O molds, a chipped gravy boat missing its ladle. I wrapped none of it. I simply placed each item into a new box, letting them clatter together. I wrote kitchen on this box. It was heavy with useless weight. This was the performance. If Marcus or Chloe stopped by unexpectedly, they would see boxes. They would see progress. They would see a woman capitulating to the inevitable. But after dark, I began the real work. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. From the top shelf of my closet, I retrieved a single, sturdy file box. It was not for packing. It was for preserving. I placed it on my bed. From my dresser, I took the leather-bound photo albums, the ones with pictures of Charles and a young Marcus, of family reunions and long-ago vacations. I did not look at them. To look would have been to feel, and feeling was a luxury I could not afford. I placed them in the file box. I added the small wooden box that held Charles's watch and my father's wedding ring. I added the folder containing our marriage certificate, Marcus's birth certificate, the important papers. Then, from beneath my mattress, I retrieved the small locked fireproof case. Inside was a single key on a plain ring. This key did not open anything in this house. It was for a safe deposit box at First City Bank, the very institution Marcus had spoken to. The irony was not lost on me. I placed the key in my sweater pocket. The file box I slid under my bed, behind the long dust ruffle where no one would think to look. The following morning, I made the call. I took my cordless phone out to the garden. The spring sun was warm on my shoulders. My rose bushes were putting out their first green leaves. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Eleanor Vance Realty," the voice answered, professional and bright. "Eleanor, it's Miriam." The tone shifted instantly, warmth replacing business. "Miriam, I was just thinking about you. How was book club?" I didn't go. I paused, watching a bee hover near the early blooms. "Something has happened. I need your professional advice." "Of course. What is it?" Her voice was alert now, attuned to the careful control in mine. "Marcus and Chloe intend to sell this house. They have spoken to a broker at your bank. They have selected a senior living community for me. They told me to pack my bags." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, Miriam, no, they can't just—" "They believe they can." I cut her off gently. "They believe the house is a shared asset, or perhaps that I will simply give in. They called it a dump. The word hung between us, a profanity in the quiet garden." "The deed," Eleanor stated, her voice now all business. "What is the status of the deed?" "It is in my name only. Charles saw to that. Sole and separate property." I could almost hear her nodding, the pieces clicking into place in her formidable mind. "Good. That is very good. And the mortgage?" "Paid in full 12 years ago." "Excellent." She was silent for a moment. "Their broker. Do you know which one?" "No, only that it was at First City." "It doesn't matter. Without your signature on a listing agreement or a sales contract, they have nothing. But they will pressure you for that signature, Miriam. Soon. I expect they will. What is your desire? Eleanor asked. It was the question of a true friend. She was not asking what I would submit to, but what I wanted to happen. I looked at my house, the familiar brick, the curtains I had sewn myself. I do not wish to live next to people who see my life as a dump to be liquidated. I will not be moved to a facility like a piece of furniture, but I also cannot stay here, not with this toxicity in the air. You wish to sell, Eleanor concluded. I wish to choose. I wish to control the sale. I wish for the proceeds to be mine, to secure a place of my own choosing, a quiet place. And I wish for Marcus and Chloe to understand completely and finally that they made a grave error. There was a long pause. I could picture Eleanor at her desk, her glasses perched on her nose, staring at a calendar as calculations turned behind her eyes. I have a proposition, she said finally, but it requires perfect timing and your absolute composure. You must continue to appear agreeable to them. Can you do that? I have been practicing my whole life, I said, and it was not entirely a joke. Good. Do not sign anything they give you, no matter what it looks like. Tell them you want your own lawyer to look it over, or that you're feeling confused. Any excuse. Meanwhile, I will do some discreet looking. There are buyers who appreciate a solid, loved home without demanding black-framed sliders. When the time is right, we will act, and we will do it quickly. Thank you, Eleanor. Don't thank me yet. Just keep packing your magazines. I'll be in touch. I ended the call and sat on the garden bench. The resolve that had been a cold, hard seed the day before was now sending out roots. It was a plan. It was actionable. I went back inside. In the living room, I opened a third box. This one I filled with books from the shelves, but not my first editions or my beloved novels. I took the outdated reference books, the old textbooks, the duplicate copies. I wrote books on the box. The shelves began to look patchy, which suited the narrative of a dismantling life. Later that afternoon, Marcus called. His voice was buoyant. Just checking in, Mom. How's the packing going? It's going, I said, keeping my voice weary but compliant. It's overwhelming, so many memories in every corner. I know, but it's for the best. Listen, we've got a realtor coming by tomorrow to take a look. Give us an official estimate. Is around 2 okay? A realtor? So soon? No time like the present, he said, his tone brooking no argument. This is Helen Wright. She's a top seller in the area. Just let her in and let her do her thing, okay? We'll meet her there. All right, Marcus. If you think it's necessary, it is. Trust me. I hung up the phone. Helen Wright. Not Eleanor. Of course not. They would want their own person, someone aggressive who would see the value only in square footage and renovation potential. I looked at the 3 boxes by the door. They were a good prop. I would need to be better tomorrow. I would need to be the fragile, overwhelmed widow, guided by her son's capable hands. I practiced a faint, confused smile in the hall mirror. It was not a pleasant expression, but it would serve its purpose. The quiet preparations were over. The performance was about to begin. The morning of the realtor's visit, I needed to go to the bank. The act was practical, but the location stirred the memory. Sitting in the safe deposit box room, a small, sterile space that smelled of metal and old paper, I held the key from my sweater pocket. The clerk brought the long, flat box and left me in private. Inside, atop the bond certificates and the insurance policies, was a single sheet of paper, heavier than the others, the deed. Seeing it there, in this quiet vault, transported me back to the day it was created. It was not after Charles's funeral, as some might romantically assume, but before, 6 months before, in fact, when the diagnosis was certain and the timeline was becoming clear. We sat in Mr. Henderson's office, a wood-paneled room that always seemed dim no matter the weather. Charles was thinner then. his suit jacket hanging a little loose on his shoulders, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Mr. Henderson, an older man with kind eyes behind thick glasses, had spread the documents on the polished desk between us. "The current deed has both your names," Mr. Henderson explained, his finger tapping the paper. "Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Standard. When one of you passes, full ownership automatically transfers to the other." Charles nodded slowly. He reached over and took my hand. His skin was cool. "We want to change that, Martin. I want to transfer my interest to Miriam now. I want the house to be in her name alone, sole and separate property." I remember the shock that went through me. "Charles, no. Why? What difference does it make?" He turned to me, his grip firming. "It makes every difference, Miriam. This house is paid for. It is your security. I need to know, with absolute certainty, that it is yours. That no one can complicate that. Not a distant relative, not a future creditor, not, well, anyone." He did not say, "not our son," but the pause was deliberate, and in retrospect, prescient. He had seen something in Marcus even then, a certain impatience, an eye for opportunity that sometimes blurred lines. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Charles, you understand that once we file this quitclaim deed, you will have no legal ownership interest in the property. It will be Miriam's entirely." "I understand perfectly," Charles said without hesitation. "That is the point." "But where will you live?" I asked, my voice tight with a confusion that bordered on hurt. It felt like a separation, a premature dismantling of our union. He smiled then, a small, tired smile that reached his eyes. "I will live in our house, with my wife, for as long as I am able. The law on paper and the reality of our home are two different things. This," he said, pointing to the new deed Mr. Henderson was preparing, "is about after. This is about your future peace of mind." I fell silent. Mr. Henderson filled out the forms with a steady hand. He explained the process in his calm, measured voice. The document would be recorded with the county. The tax basis would remain the same. It was a simple transfer. When the new deed was ready, Mr. Henderson slid it across the desk for Charles to sign. Charles picked up the pen. It was a heavy black fountain pen, the kind Mr. Henderson always used. Charles signed his name with a steady hand, the ink dark and definitive. Then he pushed the paper toward me and offered me the pen. My hand trembled. The pen felt enormous, weighted with implication. "Charles." "Your anchor, Miriam," he said softly, his voice low so only I could hear. "This is your anchor. No matter what storms come, this will hold you fast. Sign it." I looked from his resolute face to the blank line on the paper. The act felt momentous and frightening. I was accepting sole responsibility for our greatest asset, and in doing so, I felt I was accepting the looming reality of his absence. It was a tangible preparation for a world without him. I took a breath, set the nib to the paper, and signed my name. The ink flowed smoothly. My signature looked small next to his. Mr. Henderson witnessed it, notarized it, and placed it in a long envelope. "I'll file this today. You'll receive a recorded copy in the mail in a few weeks." He looked at both of us. It's a wise decision, unconventional for some, but wise. We drove home in silence for a while. Finally, I spoke. "You really think this is necessary?" Charles kept his eyes on the road. "I think," he said carefully, "that people change when money and property are involved, even people you love. I think you have a gentle heart, Miriam, and sometimes the world sees that as an opening. This closes that opening. It's not about trust. It's about structure. The house is yours. Let that be the end of any discussion. Forever." I placed my hand over his on the gear shift. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said. "Just promise me you'll remember. No matter what anyone says, no matter what pressure they apply, the answer is simple. The house is yours. I promise. Back in the bank vault 20 years later, I ran my finger over the raised seal of the county recorder's office on the deed. I could feel the slight indentation of my own signature underneath. Miriam Elaine Johnson. His name was nowhere on the document. He had erased himself from the legal record to secure my future. He had given me the ultimate shield, and I had almost forgotten its weight, its purpose. The memory solidified my resolve into something harder than steel. This was not just a house. It was a promise Charles had extracted from me, a duty to protect what he had deliberately placed in my hands. Marcus's betrayal was not just of me, but of his father's clear, calculated intent. The hurt curdled into something colder, more focused. I placed the deed back in the box, locked it, and handed it to the clerk. As I walked out of the bank into the bright spring day, the performance ahead of me felt different. It was no longer just an act of personal defiance. It was the execution of a fiduciary duty. I was not merely a wronged mother. I was a trustee, safeguarding an asset according to the explicit wishes of the grantor. The legal framework gave a clean, unemotional shape to my anger. Helen Wright, the realtor, was not just an intruder. She was a procedural obstacle. Marcus was not just a greedy son. He was an opposing party with no standing. I returned home. I changed into a softer-looking sweater. I put the kettle on. I arranged some cookies on a plate. I prepared to play my part as the vulnerable widow, the confused parent, the woman in need of guidance. But beneath that performance, I felt the solid, unassailable foundation of the deed. It was my anchor, just as Charles had said, and now I was ready to drop it right through the hull of their plans. I was pouring hot water into the teapot when the doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house, a sound usually reserved for deliveries or familiar friends. Today, it felt like a summons. I adjusted the lace doily under the cookie plate, wiped my hands on my apron, and went to answer. Marcus, Chloe, and a woman I did not recognize stood on the porch. The woman was perhaps 50, dressed in a sharply tailored burgundy suit, her blonde hair in a perfect bob. She carried a leather folder and wore a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mom," Marcus said, stepping forward to give me a quick, dutiful peck on the cheek. "This is Helen Wright, the realtor we told you about." Helen thrust her hand forward. "Mrs. Johnson, a pleasure. Marcus and Chloe have told me so much about this charming home." Her grip was firm, her gaze already sweeping past me into the foyer, assessing. "Please come in," I said, stepping back. My voice was soft, accommodating. "I've made some tea." "Oh, we won't need that," Helen said, already clicking her way across the hardwood in heeled boots. "We're on a tight schedule. Just a quick walk through to get a sense of the footprint and the condition." I saw Chloe's nose wrinkle slightly at the word condition. I merely nodded. "Of course. Whatever you need." Helen moved into the living room. She did not comment on the furniture or the books. She noted the dimensions, the ceiling height, the placement of the windows. "Original single pane," she said, tapping the glass. "Major selling point will be the light, but we'll have to market to buyers willing to upgrade. The fireplace is a nice feature. Brick could use a whitewash." "My husband built that fireplace," I said, standing quietly by my armchair. Helen paused, looked at me as if noticing me for the first time. "I'm sure he did a lovely job, for its time." She turned to Marcus. "The wall here is definitely coming down. It opens everything up." She made a note on her tablet. Marcus nodded, a manager approving a report. "Absolutely." They moved into the dining room. Helen ran a finger along the built-in china cabinet, leaving a line in the thin layer of dust. Solid wood, good storage. Again, dated aesthetic. She looked at me. "You've lived here a long time, Mrs. Johnson?" 42 years, I said. "A lifetime," she replied, and it did not sound like a compliment. "That explains the wear patterns. We'll recommend a full professional cleaning before listing. Carpets steam cleaned, walls washed. "The carpets are Persian," I said. "They require specific care." She waved a hand. "We have people." We proceeded to the kitchen. Helen opened and closed cabinets, her lips pressed together. "Painted shut," she muttered about a window. She turned on the faucet, listened to the pipes groan, then turned it off. "Galvanized plumbing. We'll have to disclose that. Could be a negotiation point." She looked at the aging appliances. "These will all be scrap. We'll stage with modern countertop appliances to suggest potential." I picked up the teapot from the counter. "Would anyone like tea after all? The water is still hot." "We're fine, Mom," Marcus said, a hint of impatience in his voice. He was following Helen like an eager pupil. "I'll have a cup," Chloe said suddenly. She was leaning against the doorway, watching me. I think she wanted to see me perform a domestic task to confirm my role in her narrative. I poured her a cup, added a sugar cube exactly as she took it, and handed it to her. She took a sip, her eyes on me over the rim. "Thank you, Miriam." "You're welcome, dear." Helen led the way upstairs. She commented on the narrowness of the hallway, the size of the bedrooms. She stood in the doorway of the room that was once Marcus's. The faded space poster was still tacked to the back of the door. "This will read as a small secondary bedroom. The master is adequate." She walked into the bathroom and sighed. "Pink tile, a classic deterrent. A full gut job is implied here." "The tile is in perfect condition," I observed mildly. "It was quite expensive when it was installed." "It's a pink bathroom, Mrs. Johnson," Helen said, as if explaining color to a child. "It screams project to every buyer under 60. We'll have to price accordingly." The tour concluded back in the living room. Helen tapped her tablet, finalizing notes. "Overall, the structure seems sound. The lot size is excellent for the area. The negatives are all cosmetic and systemic: plumbing, windows, outdated kitchens, and baths. It's what we call a value-add property. We'll target investors or young couples looking for a project. I'd recommend listing at $695 to start, expecting to settle in the mid-sixes." Marcus looked pleased. "That's in line with our projections." Helen turned her professional smile on me. "Now, Mrs. Johnson, the next step is for you to sign a listing agreement. It gives me the exclusive right to market the property for a set period. I have the paperwork right here." She opened her leather folder. I clasped my hands in front of my apron. I allowed a small, confused frown to touch my forehead. A listing agreement. So soon? I thought this was just a visit. "Time is money, Miriam," Chloe said, setting her empty teacup down with a sharp click. "I understand that, dear. It's just—" I looked to Marcus, letting my eyes widen slightly. "It's all so fast. All these decisions. The plumbing, the tiles. Martin, your father. He always handled these big papers. I wouldn't know what I'm signing." I infused my voice with a faint tremor. Marcus's expression softened into one of controlled exasperation. "Mom, it's standard. Helen knows what she's doing. We'll handle it. Could I have my son-in-law look it over? Jeffrey, he's in insurance. He understands contracts." This was a stall. Jeffrey was a pleasant man who knew nothing about real estate law. Helen's smile tightened. "We really need to get the ball rolling to capitalize on the spring market." "Just a day or two," I pleaded, looking between them. "For my peace of mind. I'm an old woman. I get flustered." I saw the look that passed between Marcus and Chloe. It was a mix of annoyance and satisfaction. Her confusion confirmed their view of her as an obstacle to be managed, not a decision-maker to be respected. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "Okay, Mom, okay. We'll give you the paperwork. You can show it to Jeffrey. But we need an answer by Friday. Can you do that?" I nodded, relief washing over my face. Yes, of course. Thank you, Marcus. You're so good to handle all this." He patted my shoulder, the benevolent patriarch. "That's what I'm here for." They left soon after, Helen promising to email the documents. I stood at the window and watched their cars pull away. The performance had been exhausting, but effective. I had bought time. More importantly, I had reinforced their perception of me as a feeble, paper-shy widow. They would not be vigilant. They would be condescending. I cleared the teacups. Chloe's cup had left a faint lipstick stain on the rim. I washed it away with hot water and soap. As I dried the cup and put it back in the cabinet, I felt a calm settle over me. They saw pink tile and galvanized pipes. They saw wear patterns and dated aesthetics. They saw a dump. I saw a trap. And they were walking right into it. The paperwork arrived via email as promised. I printed it out, the pages sliding from the machine warm and smelling of toner. The listing agreement was 12 pages long, dense with legalese. I did not read it in detail. I did not need to. I already knew I would not be signing it. I placed it on the kitchen table next to a grocery list I had been making. Marcus came by 2 days later on Friday afternoon. He was alone, which was part of the strategy. Chloe's presence often made him performative, more aggressive. Alone, he was more likely to adopt the tone of a patient, beleaguered son. He held a leather-bound folder similar to Helen Wright's. "Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. He glanced at the kitchen table, saw the printed agreement next to my notepad. "Did you get a chance to look it over? Talk to Jeffrey?" I gestured to the chair opposite me. "I did. Jeffrey said it looks very standard. He said you've chosen a good realtor." This was a lie. I had not spoken to Jeffrey, but it was a lie that would please him. He sat, opening his own folder. "Good. That's good. So, we're ready to sign? Helen is eager to get the sign in the yard." "There's just so much of it," I said, flipping the edge of the stack of pages with a faint sigh. "All these clauses. It makes my head spin. Your father always said never to sign anything you don't fully understand." Marcus suppressed a sigh of his own. "I understand it, Mom. I've been through it. It's boilerplate. It just says Helen is our agent for 90 days. That's all." "But what if we change our minds?" I asked, injecting a note of childish worry into my voice. "We won't change our minds. This is the best path forward." He pulled a single sheet from his folder. It was a different document. "Look, to make it easier, Helen said we could start with this. It's just a permission form. It authorizes her to bring contractors through to give us estimates for the recommended work, the plumbing, the windows. That way we have hard numbers for the disclosure. It's not the listing agreement itself. It's just a preliminary step." I looked at the paper. It was, as he said, a simple one-page authorization form. It had lines for property address, my name, and a signature block. It was meaningless in the grand scheme. Signing it gave Helen Wright no rights to sell the house. It merely allowed her to schedule walkthroughs with tradespeople. To Marcus, it was a foot in the door, a way to get me comfortable with the process. To me, it was the perfect tool. I let my shoulders relax, feigning relief. "Oh, that seems less official." "It is," he said, pushing the paper toward me. He uncapped a nice pen from his pocket and offered it to me. "See? We'll take it one step at a time. You sign this and we can get the ball rolling on the estimates. We can talk about the big contract next week." I took the pen. It was heavy, expensive. I held it above the signature line, hesitating. "And this doesn't sell the house?" "No, Mom," he said, his voice gentle with condescension. "It doesn't sell the house. I promise." I nodded, as if reassured by his promise. I bent over the paper. I signed my name, Miriam E. Johnson, with a slow, careful script. The pen glided smoothly. I made sure the signature was clear and legible, the kind of signature one uses on an important document. When I finished, I placed the pen down with a decisive click. Marcus's face broke into a broad, triumphant smile. He did not try to hide it. In his eyes, he had won. He had gotten the first signature. The dam was broken. The rest would be a formality. He picked up the paper, blew lightly on the ink, and slid it into his folder with reverence. "Excellent. Thank you, Mom. This is a big step. You'll see, everything is going to work out perfectly." "You're such a good son to handle all this," I said, my voice warm with manufactured gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He beamed, the praise feeding his sense of control. "It's my job to take care of you." He stood, folder tucked under his arm. "I'll get this over to Helen right away. She'll probably call to set up the contractor visits early next week. Is that okay?" "Whatever you think is best, dear." He left then, his step light, almost jaunty. I watched from the window as he got into his car, a smile still on his face. He started the engine and drove away without a backward glance. I remained at the table. I looked at the untouched listing agreement, then at the grocery list. I picked up my own pen, a cheap ballpoint, and added tea and eggs to the list. The ordinary act grounded me. The deception was complete. He believed he was managing me, guiding me from one signature to the next until I surrendered the house. He believed the pen he provided, the document he curated, were instruments of his control. He did not understand that my signature on that trivial form was a decoy, a piece of theater designed to validate his confidence and blind him to the real movement happening elsewhere. I had signed away nothing, but he had gained everything he wanted: the illusion of progress, the confirmation of my pliability. It was the most dangerous kind of victory because it made him stop looking closely. It made him complacent. I picked up the phone and dialed Eleanor's mobile number. She answered on the second ring. "He just left," I said without preamble. "And he brought a permission form for contractor estimates. I signed it." Eleanor was silent for a moment. "Good, that's perfect. It's busy work. It keeps him occupied. How did he seem?" "Smug," I said. "Very pleased with himself." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Excellent. Then we are on schedule. Our buyers are pre-approved and ready. They've seen the pictures I discreetly shared, and they love it. They don't want to change a thing, Miriam. Not the fireplace, not the tiles, not the cabinets." A strange feeling tightened my throat. It wasn't sadness, exactly. It was a sharp sense of validation. "When?" I asked. "Monday," Eleanor said, her tone turning crisp and professional. "Meet me at the Garden Cafe at 10. Bring your driver's license. We'll sign the real paperwork then. By close of business Monday, it will be a done deal." "Monday," I repeated. "Are you ready?" she asked, and I knew she wasn't asking about logistics. I looked around my kitchen, at the cabinets whose wood grain I knew by heart, at the window over the sink where I watch birds at the feeder. "Yes," I said, "I am ready." I hung up the phone. The kitchen was quiet. The printed listing agreement sat where Marcus had left it, a phantom of a future that would never happen. I picked up the stack of paper, carried it to the recycling bin in the garage, and dropped it in. The sound was final. The performance was nearly over. The real act was about to begin. Monday morning was clear and cool. I dressed with care. A simple navy dress, low-heeled shoes, my pearl earrings. I placed my driver's license, the safe deposit box key, and a pen from the library, a cheap, reliable ballpoint, into my handbag. I did not look at the house as I left. I locked the door and walked to my car. The Garden Cafe was on the other side of town, a place Eleanor and I had gone to for years after book club meetings. It was familiar ground, neutral territory. I saw her through the window, already seated in a corner booth, 2 steaming mugs in front of her. She was studying a file. When I entered, the bell above the door chimed, and she looked up, her face breaking into a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She waved me over. "Miriam," she said, standing to give me a brief, firm hug. She smelled of lavender and coffee. "You look ready." "I am," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. The vinyl seat was cool. "Good. They'll be here in 10 minutes. I wanted to go over everything with you first." She opened the file. It was a different kind of paperwork than Helen writes. The font was cleaner, the pages fewer but denser with meaning. "This is the purchase agreement. The buyers are Sarah and David Chen. She's a 5th-grade teacher. He's a physical therapist. They have a 3-year-old daughter. They've been saving for years, looking for a solid house in an established neighborhood. They don't want a project. They want a home." She slid a photograph across the table. It was a casual shot, the three of them in a park smiling. They looked kind, normal. They loved the pictures of your garden. Sarah said the kitchen cabinets have character. David noticed the built-ins in the dining room and said they were perfect for their books. I looked at the photo. They did not look like people who would whitewash a brick fireplace. A wave of something akin to relief passed through me. The price? I asked. Eleanor named a figure. It was fair, slightly above what Helen Wright had suggested, but not inflated. It's a clean, full-price offer. No contingencies for repairs because they aren't asking for any. They have a full pre-approval. The closing is set for 30 days out, which is standard. She looked at me closely. This is the point of no return, Miriam. Once you sign this, the house is legally under contract to them. Marcus and Chloe will have no recourse. I met her gaze. I understand. This is what I want. She nodded, satisfied. Then we proceed. The cafe door chimed again. A young couple entered, looking around somewhat nervously. Eleanor raised a hand and they made their way to our booth. Sarah Chen had a warm, open face and wore a simple cardigan. David had a quiet, steady presence. Introductions were made. Handshakes were offered. Their handshakes were firm, not performative. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," Sarah said as they sat down. "Your home is beautiful. We drove by yesterday evening just to see the street. It feels like a real community." "It has been a good home," I said. David leaned forward slightly. "Eleanor told us about the situation. We want you to know we're not investors. We're not going to flip it. We hope to live there for a very long time." His directness was appreciated. "That is what I needed to hear," I said. Eleanor took over then, guiding us through the documents. She explained each page in clear, simple language. The offer, the disclosures, the timeline. I listened, asked a few practical questions about the closing process. Sarah and David listened just as intently. There was no rush, no pressure. It was a transaction, but it was being conducted with a sense of mutual respect. Then we reached the deed. Eleanor had prepared the deed transfer document. It was a single crucial page. She placed it in front of me, aligning it neatly on the table. "This transfers the title from you to the Chens upon successful closing. This is the signature that matters." I opened my handbag. I took out my library pen. I did not use the fancy pen the cafe provided for signing credit card slips. This was my signature, my act, and I would use my instrument. I looked at the line. I thought of Charles, of his hand over mine in Mr. Henderson's office. "Your anchor." I was not letting go of the anchor. I was choosing who to pass it to. I signed my name, Miriam Elaine Johnson. The ink from the cheap pen was blue, vivid against the white paper. It was the same signature I had used on the meaningless permission form, but this time it carried the weight of law and finality. I pushed the paper toward Eleanor, who notarized it with her stamp and signature. Sarah let out a small, shaky breath. David reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to us." "I think I do," I said quietly. There were more papers to initial, copies to be distributed. The meeting took about 40 minutes. When it was done, we all stood. Sarah impulsively reached out and hugged me. It was brief and heartfelt. "We'll take good care of it," she whispered. "I know you will." They left first, walking out into the sunlight with a new lightness in their steps. I watched them go. Eleanor began stacking the paperwork into her file. "It's done," she said. "The listing will go into the multiple listing service this afternoon as sale pending. Helen Wright will see it. Marcus will see it. The clock starts now." I sat back down, suddenly aware of a deep fatigue. It was not unpleasant. It was the fatigue after completing a difficult, necessary task. "What will happen?" I asked. "Helen will call Marcus in a panic. Marcus will call you, confused, then angry, then desperate. You must not answer. Let the machine get it. Let them unravel. Our next move is physical. You need to be ready to leave when the time comes." "I am ready." I had my file box under the bed. I had my suitcase. I had the information for the condo Eleanor had helped me find, a quiet one-bedroom in a building with a garden courtyard, already purchased with a portion of the sale proceeds. The rest would be invested, my anchor transformed into a steady income. Eleanor paid the bill. We walked out together. On the sidewalk, she turned to me. "You were magnificent in there. Charles would be proud." I nodded, unable to speak around the sudden tightness in my throat. We parted ways. I drove home. The house looked the same as it had that morning, the bricks, the roof, the rose bushes by the porch. But it was no longer mine. It was a vessel awaiting its new occupants. My role was now that of a steward, a temporary occupant, guarding it until the handover. I unlocked the door and went inside. The silence was different. It was no longer a silence waiting to be filled with their plans. It was a silence of completion. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and put it on the stove. The familiar ritual grounded me. The revenge plot was no longer a plot. It was a fact. The house was sold, and they did not know it yet. The waiting was the final part of the performance. The silence lasted 3 days. The phone rang several times, the machine clicking on. I heard Marcus's voice, first confused. "Mom, Helen called. There's some kind of error on the listing." Then insistent, "You need to call me back." Then sharp, "Miriam, this is important." I did not pick up. I watered my plants. I finished packing my real boxes. The file box from under the bed, 2 suitcases of clothes, a crate of kitchen essentials I would need before the closing. I labeled them clearly with my new address. I placed them by the front door, next to the decoy boxes of magazines and old pots. On the 4th day, a large moving truck pulled up to the curb. It was a bright, professional vehicle with a local company's logo on the side. 2 men in uniform jumpsuits got out of the cab, consulted a clipboard, and walked up the path. I was ready. I had brought my favorite armchair out onto the porch that morning. I sat in it now, a glass of iced tea on the small table beside me, a wide-brimmed hat shading my face from the mid-morning sun. I watched them approach. "Ma'am?" The older of the 2 men said, tipping his cap. "We're here for the Johnson job, scheduled for a 10 a.m. loadout." "You're right on time," I said, smiling pleasantly. "The boxes for transport are just inside the front door. They are labeled. Please leave the ones marked Donate in the living room. The others go to the address on the labels." They nodded, accustomed to clear instructions. "Yes, ma'am." They went inside. I heard the sound of their dollies rolling on the hardwood, the efficient thumps as they began moving the boxes. They took my real boxes first, loading them with care onto their truck. Minutes later, Marcus's car pulled up behind the moving van, followed closely by Chloe's. They got out quickly. Marcus's face was a mixture of irritation and triumph. He had clearly come to supervise what he believed was my move to the senior community. He saw me on the porch, saw the movers, and his expression smoothed into one of satisfied control. He strode up the walk, Chloe hurrying behind him. "Mom," he said, his voice loud, projecting over the sounds of the movers. "I've been calling you. There's been a huge misunderstanding with the listing, but it's okay. We're here to help with the move." He glanced at the movers carrying a box from the house. "I see you're already on top of things. Good." "I like to be prepared," I said, taking a sip of my tea. Chloe was looking at the truck, then at the house, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "These aren't the guys we arranged with the community, Marcus. They said they'd send a van." Marcus frowned. "Who did you hire, Mom?" He asked it as if I had chosen the wrong brand of toothpaste. "I hired these gentlemen," I said. "They were recommended." He shook his head, a dismissive gesture. "Well, it's fine. We'll sort out the billing later. The important thing is we're getting you moved." He turned to the mover who was coming back up the path. "Hey, careful with that. What's in there?" "Books and linens, sir," the mover said, not breaking stride. Marcus and Chloe went into the house. I remained in my chair. I could hear their voices inside, a low, urgent conversation. Then Marcus came back out, his brow furrowed. "Mom, where's all your stuff? The furniture? The china? There's just a few boxes by the door." "That is all I'm taking," I said. "That can't be all," Chloe said, emerging behind him, her voice strained. "What about the dining set? The bedroom furniture? We discussed this. The community apartment is furnished, but you can bring small pieces. We have to stage this house for sale. We need it empty." "I don't believe you will be staging it," I said calmly. The two movers came out with the last of my boxes, the file box and the crate of kitchenware. They loaded them onto the truck. The younger mover approached me with his clipboard. "That's the last of the items from the address list, ma'am. We'll proceed to the delivery location." "Thank you," I said. "Delivery location?" Marcus snapped, stepping forward. "What delivery location? She's going to the Oak Haven Senior Living on Elm Street." The mover looked at his clipboard, then at me, sensing tension. "Our work order says delivery to 1422 Maple Court, Unit 4B. "That's not right," Marcus said, his voice rising. He turned to me. "Mom, what is this? What's Maple Court?" "That is my new address," I said. Chloe made a sharp, incredulous sound. "Your new—" No, we arranged for Oak Haven. We have the paperwork. We toured it. You agreed." "I never agreed to Oak Haven," I said, setting my glass down. "You announced it. There is a difference." Marcus's face was darkening from confusion to anger. "Fine, whatever. We can fix this. But first, these movers need to stop. We're not ready. The house isn't sold yet." He said this last part loudly for the movers' benefit to establish authority. The older mover looked at me. "Ma'am, your job is complete," I said to him. "You may go. Thank you for your professionalism." The two men exchanged a glance, nodded at me, and walked quickly back to their truck, eager to depart from a family dispute. They closed up the back and drove away, leaving the three of us on the porch. The silence after the truck's departure was profound. Marcus was staring at me, his chest heaving. Chloe had her arms crossed tightly, her knuckles white. "What have you done?" Marcus asked, the words low and harsh. I looked past him, down the quiet street. "I have moved my personal belongings to my new residence. The items marked donate are for charity. The rest of the furnishings will remain with the house." "Remain with the— For who?" Chloe cried. "We need to sell it empty, to get top dollar. You're ruining everything." I finally stood up from my chair. I faced my son. "No, Marcus, you are mistaken. You are not selling this house." He took a step closer. His expression was one of pure, uncomprehending fury. "What are you talking about? Of course we are. We have a realtor. We have a plan. You signed the—" His words trailed off. He was thinking of the permission form, the only thing he had ever gotten me to sign. The flimsiness of it must have dawned on him in that moment, the utter lack of legal power it held. I saw the first crack in his certainty, the first shadow of a doubt that was about to become a chasm. The reversal was not a sudden shout. It was a quiet, inexorable tilt. I picked up my glass and my book from the side table. "If you'll excuse me," I said, "I am expecting another visitor." I walked past them into the house. They followed me, sputtering questions that I did not answer. I went to the kitchen, rinsed my glass, and placed it in the drying rack. I could feel them hovering in the doorway, a storm of confusion and gathering rage about to break. The doorbell rang. It was a clean, clear sound in the tense atmosphere. "Are you expecting someone else?" Marcus demanded, as if he owned the right to vet my guests. "Yes," I said, walking toward the front door. "I believe it is time for the professionals to speak." I opened the door. Eleanor stood on the porch, dressed in a tailored slate-gray suit, her silver hair in its usual elegant twist. She carried a slim briefcase. Her expression was neutral, professional, the face she used for difficult closings. "Miriam," she said with a slight formal nod. "Eleanor, thank you for coming. They're in the living room." Marcus and Chloe had followed me to the foyer. Marcus's face was a storm of confusion. Eleanor? Mrs. Vance? What are you doing here? Eleanor stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She did not answer him directly. Instead, she set her briefcase on the small hall table and opened it. Marcus, Chloe, I'm here in my capacity as Miriam's real estate agent of record. The words hung in the air for a second before they landed. Her agent, Chloe said, her voice rising. What does that mean? Helen Wright is our agent. Helen Wright does not have a valid listing agreement for this property, Eleanor stated, her tone crisp and factual. She pulled a single sheet from her briefcase. I do. An exclusive right-to-sell agreement signed by the sole owner of record, Miriam Elaine Johnson, dated this past Monday. The property went under contract that same afternoon. The sale is pending, with a closing date set for the 28th of this month. Marcus stared at the paper Eleanor held out as if it were written in a foreign language. He did not take it. That's impossible. You can't. She didn't. I am handling the sale. You are not the owner, Eleanor said, her voice cool. You have no legal standing to sell this property. Your mother is the sole title holder. Her signature is the only one that matters. Chloe let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. This is ridiculous. Of course he has standing. It's his inheritance. It's the family home. It is his mother's home, Eleanor corrected, deeded solely to her by her late husband, Charles Johnson, via quitclaim deed in 2003. I have a copy of the recorded deed right here. She produced another document. His name is not on it. Yours are not on it. The bank has no lien from you because you cannot place a lien on property you do not own. The broker you spoke to was misinformed, or you misrepresented your authority. Marcus's face had lost all its color. He looked from Eleanor to me. Mom, what is this? What is she talking about? I said nothing. I let Eleanor continue. This was her arena. The transaction is straightforward, Eleanor went on as if giving a status report. The buyers are a lovely young family. They made a full-price offer which Miriam accepted. The inspection period has passed without issue. All that remains is the closing. Buyers, Marcus whispered. The word seemed to paralyze him. Yes, the property is sold. No! The shout came from Chloe. It was raw, furious. It is not sold. You can't do this. We have plans. We have money tied up. We've made commitments. Eleanor turned her steady gaze on Chloe. Your commitments are not Miriam's responsibility. Your plans were made without her consent and against her interests. Marcus found his voice again, but it was cracked, desperate. Mom, tell her to stop. Tell her this is a mistake. We're family. This is my house, too. You can't just sell it out from under me. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, level, the voice I had used at the library desk for 30 years. It was never your house, Marcus. It was mine. Your father made certain of that. He gave it to me to hold, to keep, to decide its fate. But you signed, he blurted, grabbing for the memory of his small victory. You signed the form. You agreed. I signed a permission form for contractor estimates. That is all. I never signed a listing agreement. I never signed a sales contract for your benefit. I played along. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. The full scope of the deception dawned on him then. The packing, the vague smiles, the hesitant questions, all of it an act. His eyes widened with a horrified understanding. You were pretending. This whole time. I was surviving, I said. He staggered back a step, leaning against the wall. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dazed shock. So it's gone? You just sold it? I sold it, I confirmed. To who? Chloe demanded, her hands clenched into fists. Who are these people? That is no longer your concern, Eleanor said, closing her briefcase with a definitive click. My client's business with the buyers is private. What matters now is the transition. The new owners will take possession after closing. Miriam will be fully relocated to her new residence prior to that date. You two have no further business here." "No further business?" Chloe shrieked. "We have everything tied to this. Our down payment, our future. You've stolen it." Eleanor's voice cut through the hysteria, cold and sharp. "You attempted to manipulate an elderly woman into surrendering her primary asset for your personal gain. You called her home a dump. You made plans to dismantle her life without her consent. You have no moral or legal ground to stand on. I suggest you leave now before you say something that could have legal consequences." The threat, quietly delivered, silenced them. Marcus was staring at the floor, his mind clearly racing through the ruins of his plan, looking for a lever, a loophole, and finding none. The legal language, the deeds, the dates. It was a wall he could not breach. His own ignorance of the home's true ownership was his undoing. He looked up at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw not anger, but a hollow, bewildered hurt. A child who had broken his favorite toy and just realized it could not be fixed. "Why?" he asked, the single word stripped bare. I met his gaze. I did not offer comfort. I stated a fact. "Because you told me to pack my bags, because you thought you could." I turned to Eleanor. "I believe we are finished here." Eleanor nodded. She picked up her briefcase. "Marcus, Chloe, I will show you out." They were too defeated, too stunned to resist. They moved like sleepwalkers. Eleanor escorted them to the door, holding it open. Chloe walked out without a backward glance, her body rigid with furious humiliation. Marcus paused on the threshold. He looked back at me, his mouth working, but no sound came out. Then he turned and followed his wife. Eleanor closed the door softly, the lock engaged with a solid, final sound. She let out a long breath and leaned against the doorframe. "Well," she said, "that was unpleasant." "It was necessary," I said. The adrenaline that had sustained me was ebbing, leaving a deep, weary stillness in its place. "It was," she agreed. She looked at me, her professional mask softening. "Are you all right?" I considered the question. I felt no joy, no triumph. I felt a vast, quiet emptiness, like a field after a fire. But in that emptiness, there was a clear, clean space to breathe. "I will be," I said. The house was silent again. But this silence was different. It was the silence after a storm has passed, when the air is washed clean and the only sound is the drip of water from the leaves. The climax was over. The power had shifted irrevocably. Now there was only the practical matter of leaving. Eleanor stayed for another hour. We drank tea in the quiet kitchen, not talking much. The performative energy was gone. We discussed practicalities, the closing date, the transfer of utilities, the final walkthrough. She confirmed the small van from a different company would arrive at 2 o'clock to collect the donation boxes and take the few remaining items I wanted to my new condo. When she left, she gave my hand a firm squeeze. "See you at the closing," she said. I was alone again, but not for long. At noon, a sedan pulled up. Sarah and David Chen got out. They had asked, through Eleanor, if they could see the house one more time before the closing to measure for curtains. I had agreed. They waved tentatively as they approached. I opened the door before they could ring. "Mrs. Johnson," Sarah said, her face anxious. "We hope this is okay. We don't want to intrude." "You are not intruding," I said. "You are the future owners. Come in." They stepped inside, their movements respectful, almost reverent. David had a measuring tape in his pocket, but he didn't pull it out immediately. They just stood in the foyer, looking at the living room archway, the sunlight on the stairs. "It feels different today," Sarah said softly. "Quieter." "A lot has happened here this morning," I said, "but it is ready for you." We walked through the rooms. They pointed out things they loved. The way the light hit the dining room floorboards in the afternoon, the deep windowsill in the kitchen perfect for herb pots, the sturdy shelf in the hall closet. Their observations were about living, not renovating. "We were thinking," David said, "that our daughter's room could go here." He gestured to the smaller bedroom, the one with the space poster. It gets the morning sun. That was my son's room, I said. They both looked at me, a flicker of concern in their eyes. He loved the morning sun, too. Sarah touched my arm, a brief, gentle contact. We'll take good care of it, all of it. I believed her. I know. We were in the kitchen when another car pulled up. I saw it from the window. It was Marcus. He parked haphazardly at the curb and got out, walking slowly up the path as if in a trance. He hadn't seen the Chen's car on the other side of the moving van that was still parked out front from the earlier confusion. The door was open. He appeared in the doorway, his expression hollow, his eyes red-rimmed. He saw me with the two strangers and froze. Mom. Marcus. These are Sarah and David Chen. They have purchased the house. He looked at them, his jaw working. The Chens, polite but understandably uncomfortable, nodded. Hello, David said. Marcus ignored them. His focus was on me. I need to talk to you, alone. This is not a good time, I said, please. The word was stripped of all its usual command. It was a plea. I turned to the Chens. Would you excuse us for a moment? You are welcome to continue looking. Perhaps the backyard. Of course, Sarah said quickly, ushering David toward the back door. Marcus and I stood in the kitchen. He looked around as if seeing it for the first time. You really did it. I did. What about all of this? He gestured vaguely at the cabinets, the table, the walls, the furniture, the pictures, your whole life. The Chens are buying the house and its contents, as we agreed. I have taken what I wish to keep. The rest stays. It is part of the home. And me? He asked, his voice cracking. What about me? What am I supposed to do now? I looked at him. The little boy was gone. The entitled man was shattered. What remained was a stranger I had a biological connection to. You will have to determine that for yourself. You are an adult. Your life, your commitments, your future. They are your responsibility, not mine. They always should have been. He sank onto one of the kitchen chairs, the same chair he had sat in when he brought the permission form. He put his head in his hands. I've lost everything. You tried to take everything, I corrected, my voice steady. There is a difference. You did not lose what was never yours. He had no answer to that. The truth was a weight he could not lift. The back door opened and the Chens returned, their steps hesitant. Marcus slowly stood up. He looked at David, then at Sarah. You're the ones? Yes, David said, his tone firm but not unkind. Marcus nodded, a jerky, defeated motion. He looked at me one last time, a look of such profound confusion it was almost pitiable. Then he turned and walked out of the house. We heard his car start and drive away. Sarah let out a held breath. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Johnson. That was difficult. It is finished now, I said. At 2 o'clock, the small van arrived. The two men loaded the donation boxes and the single armchair I had kept from the porch. Everything else I owned was already at Maple Court. I had only one task left. I took the house keys from my key ring. They were 3 keys, the front door, the back door, the deadbolt. They felt warm in my hand. I turned to Sarah and David, who were waiting in the foyer. It is time, I said. I held out the keys. Sarah reached out, and I placed them in her palm, closing her fingers over them. The house is yours. Thank you, David said, his voice thick. I picked up my handbag, the same one I had taken to the cafe. I did not look in every room. I did not touch the walls. I had already said my goodbyes in my own way over the preceding weeks. I walked to the front door. They followed me. On the porch, I turned. Goodbye, I said. Goodbye, Mrs. Johnson, Sarah said. Thank you for everything. I walked down the path to the waiting van. The driver held the passenger door open for me. I got in. He closed the door, a solid thump that separated me from the house. He got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. I did not look back. I watched the tree-lined street pass by the window, then the turn onto the main road. The house, my home for 42 years, receded into the past. The boxes in the back of the van held my present. The condo at Maple Court held my future. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music, just the hum of the engine, the fading afternoon light, and a silence within me that was no longer filled with dread, but with a simple, uncluttered peace. The final boxes were in transit. My life was my own again. The van delivered me and my armchair to 1422 Maple Court. The building was a modest, well-kept brick complex with a central courtyard garden. My unit was on the 4th floor with a balcony overlooking a ginkgo tree. The movers brought the few boxes inside, placed the chair where I indicated, and left. The door closed. The silence was immediate, but it was a new silence. It was mine. I unpacked the boxes, I put my clothes in the closet, I placed the photo albums on a shelf in the living area. I set Charles's watch and my father's ring on the dresser in the bedroom. I filled the kitchen cupboards with my dishes, the familiar plates and cups that had made the journey. The space was smaller, but every inch was under my control. There were no ghosts in these walls, only potential. The next morning, I went to the garden center. I bought a large clay pot, a bag of potting soil, and a small trowel. I also purchased a young clematis vine, known for its resilience. When I returned, I took a cutting from the rose bush I had brought from the old garden, wrapped in damp paper towel in my bag. I prepared the pot on my balcony. The sun was warm on my back. I filled the pot with soil, made a small hole, and carefully planted the rose cutting. I placed the clematis beside it, giving it a small trellis to climb. I watered them both. The physical act of planting something in this new soil felt significant. It was not a metaphor. It was horticulture. It was a practical step toward making this space a home. The plants would either take root or they would not. I would tend to them and find out. A week passed. The closing occurred at Eleanor's office. I signed the final papers. The funds were wired to my account. It was a procedural end. I felt nothing but a mild sense of administrative completion. Eleanor drove me home afterward. She carried a bottle of wine and a bag from the bakery. "Housewarming," she said when we entered. "It's not much," I said, gesturing to the compact living area. "It's yours," she replied. "That's everything." We sat on the balcony. She poured the wine. The afternoon light filtered through the leaves of the ginkgo tree. We talked about ordinary things. The book club's next selection, a new restaurant downtown, the weather. The conversation was easy, unburdened. After a while, she asked, "Have you heard from him?" I took a sip of wine. "Marcus called once. He left a message. He said he was sorry for how things went. He said he needed to talk. I did not call back." Eleanor nodded. "That's your right." "I know." I looked at the rose cutting, its leaves still looking fragile. His apology, if it is one, is for his defeat, not for his actions. He is sorry his plan failed. I am not sure he is sorry he made the plan. That is a distinction I cannot afford to ignore. "You don't have to," she said simply. "I have thought about bitterness," I continued, the words forming clearly as I spoke. "I expected to feel it, to nurture it, but I find I do not have the energy for it. What they did required all my energy to counter. Now that it is done, I am tired. I want quiet. Bitterness is not quiet. It is a noisy, demanding tenant. I have no room for it here." Eleanor smiled. "That is the wisest thing I've heard in a long time." We finished the wine. She helped me hang a painting I had kept, a watercolor of a lake at dawn. We positioned it over the sofa. It looked right. When she left, she hugged me. "You did it, Miriam. You are free." After she was gone, I stood on the balcony as the evening cooled. Lights came on in other windows. I could hear the faint sounds of a television, a child laughing. Normal life. I was a part of it, yet separate. I was anonymous here. No one knew me as Marcus's mother or as Charles's widow. I was just the woman in 4B. I thought about the house. I did not miss the weight of it, the constant maintenance, the memories in every corner that had become painful. I missed the garden, but I had brought a piece of it with me. I would grow a new one here, in pots. The revenge, as people might call it, was complete. It had not been dramatic. It had been a series of paperwork and quiet decisions. The satisfaction was not in their humiliation, though that had been a consequence. The satisfaction was in the quiet of this balcony, in the deed to this condo, paid in full, in the financial statements that showed security, in the simple act of locking my own door and knowing no one had a plan to undo my life. I had reclaimed what was mine: authority, dignity, peace. I had done it not with shouts, but with signatures, not with tears, but with strategy. Charles's anchor had held. It had held me fast through the storm they created, and now it had been hauled up and secured in a new harbor. I went inside. The rooms were tidy, scaled to my needs. I made a cup of tea. I sat in my armchair, the same one from the porch, and opened a book. The words made sense. The story held my attention. The hours passed without interruption. When I grew tired, I went to bed. I slept through the night. In the morning, I watered the plants on the balcony. The rose cutting was still green. The clematis had a new tendril reaching for the trellis. They were taking root. I watched them for a moment, then went inside to start my day. There were no boxes to pack, no realtors to avoid, no decisions to fear. There was only the day ahead and the one after that, each one mine to shape. The story was over. My life was beginning again.